All right, welcome to the Design Build Show. I'm here with one of my best friends in the whole wide world, Mr. Ryan P. Gross.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
Yeah, just happens to be a design builder.
Took after my boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ryan and I worked together in a design studio 10 plus years ago. And now Ryan is in LA. He has his own company called K-Dan Design Build. And who's K-Dan?
K-Dan, you gonna do this?
Yeah.
You gonna do this right now? Okay. So K-Dan is my fiance. And I'll tell you, now he's gonna start giving me some flack about that. Why don't I name it after myself? Well, my last name is Gross. So you ain't gonna be doing gross design. Who all wants a gross backyard? So no.
Yeah.
So
But
no,
did
it's K-Dan Designs.
you guys start the business together?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And it's, what kind of business is it?
It's a landscape design and build. So we do everything you can do in the backyard.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And you guys didn't start off design build, right? You started
No.
off doing only design for the first year or two?
Yeah, well, I've got a background in interior and exterior architecture, and I was doing that, and Kate was doing landscape design for another company. And her stuff was great. I mean, it was phenomenal, and I saw what she was doing, and I told her, we should start something out of that. And I thought it was just going to be a side gig, and we got that going, and within 6 months, it took off. And I think within 9 months, I quit my job.
And you went to work for her?
I hired her on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I started the company.
Okay.
K-Dan Designs. I am the owner. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so then, so we were doing designs only for a long time.
Yeah.
And then clients were asking us, to manage their install and kind of have that designer touch throughout the installation process, because that's
Was it a problem? Like, were clients running into problems on projects that you only designed?
Yeah, of course, because you
Yeah.
got division of hats, you got division of responsibilities, and you've got us as the designer, we're all responsible, and then you got the contractor that comes in that sort of, because they have no place in the design, they kind of lack the responsibility, or sort of lacked the full control of the project. So we then had to step in for the client and act as an owner's rep to sort of pull the whole project together and kind of run it. And so at first we kind of ran the client's projects and for them, with their own hired contractor.
Like a construction manager, almost like
Yeah.
their client's agent.
Yeah, exactly.
And they pay you a fee for that, or you just did it?
Yeah, we would sometimes put on like a 15% project management fee.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that was fine, and we were doing that, and we were very successful. Clients were real happy, but with overhead, with us increasing and our promotion and all that kind of stuff, 15% wasn't cutting it, because 10% was overhead, so that didn't really leave a whole lot of profit for the project management. So got my general contractor's license and started operating as a general contractor. So we became a design build essentially.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What give some examples, if you have any, of when you were doing just the design, like what a client ran into, or like you guys had just done the design and then the client hired a contractor. What would they call you about, or what would you see that wasn't ideal?
Quality of work, I guess, sort of just that craftsman, that sort of craftsman touch, like the pride of the product, and they would, contractors, even ones that meant well, just didn't really have the full view, the full artistic view of it. And so when they would try to basically execute your design, it didn't always achieve, 100%.
Yeah.
And so the client wanted us to come back in and help, kind of communicate to the contractor, appropriately, and help the contractor get back on track with whatever the design intent was.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you didn't do the design,
Of course.
you have whatever they bid it on.
Yep.
That's what their mindset is about owning, right?
Exactly.
It's very hard, I find. It's the very few who look beyond that and look beyond, like, hey, we want to create the best project for the client here, and are even able to, right? Because a contractor might not have the aesthetic, the
might not have the training.
skill set,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
you know, they're able to be responsible for what they're responsible for.
That's right. You know, and also, not to give you too much credit, but I remember us chatting. I mean, I don't know what it was, 6 years ago, and we were discussing, you know, the role of the architect and what the architect was and what the architect meant back in the day.
Yeah.
And back in the day, the architect was the man. I mean, he was
Yeah.
the guy that designed it and got it built.
Yeah.
There was no differentiation between an architect, a designer, and a contractor.
I mean, most people don't know that. I'd say still, you know, that's the big purpose for this show, is to like re-educate people, because you go back 120 years,
right?
And the architect built. The architect was responsible for the build, took ownership for that. And you know, you look at the number of years that buildings have been occurring. The great majority of history, that's the way it went down.
All the way through back to Egyptian periods. You know, even
That's right.
like the all the relics that we see. You know, the pyramids, all that stuff. There was an architect that supervised thousands of workers, and he was on the job every day running the work.
That's right.
As the architect, you know, as the master builder.
The derivation of the word architect is Greek for master builder.
Right.
And you go through the ages, even the Renaissance, where you had this artist who didn't know how to build, right?
Right.
They were just the Renaissance was all about the return of antiquity, and they were specialists in that antiquity, so they were who clients went to because they knew how to give them that.
Yep.
But they didn't actually call themselves architects.
Right.
Like Michelangelo, one of the greatest artists of all time, also very well known as an architect.
Amazing architect. Yeah.
Never. He said, "I'm not an architect. You know, I'm a genius.
Right.
I'm an amazing artist, but the build thing's not my." And they looked the viewpoint of that role was different.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. We're bringing it back.
That's right.
And it just makes so much sense.
It does, because you know, as a client, you know, because I've been every hat there is, where I've been the client, I've been the project manager, I've been the contractor, I've been the designer, the architect, I've been the owner's rep, and I've seen projects complete, you know, go through, you know, the whole process from each of those hats and what we ran into. And really, you know, the only time it was successful is when you had, you know, one person who was responsible for the design through to completion. You know, all the way to the very end of the punch list. You know, all the wrap up points, and taking your designer eye and kind of making those last little tweaks.
Yeah, so true. I mean, even within my company, it's something we can struggle with. Is we're a design build firm, but it's not like one guy or one gal is running the gamut of the whole project. We have turnovers, but if there isn't somebody who's really overseeing it all, and who's really like responsible for that, things can get lost. Even though it's kind of the hard way to be accountable for it, because you end up being accountable for it the hard way, right? Because there's something that's dropped, and there's nobody else to point the finger at. I love that.
The mirror.
I actually,
you know, you can only point at the mirror. You know?
I love that aspect of it.
Yeah, and what I meant by that was one company.
Yeah.
You know, like, because obviously as you grow, you take on more staff, you divide up the responsibilities, but it's all within the same team, within the same group.
Yeah.
And you know, that's when it really makes sense to the client, because you know, they know they're going to get a product at the end, because they've got one person that's responsible from beginning to end, and they don't, you know, it's turnkey. It's the way it was meant to be back then, and then it kind of fell away from that. And, you know, you've done such a great job of bringing that back with your company. You know, we emulate a lot of what you do. So.
Oh man, you're giving me too much credit.
Oh yeah.
You're giving me too much credit.
You know.
But you know, I'm going to write a blog about it soon. But in Japan, the word architect didn't even exist until 1950. Because if you think about it, even like, you know, the 1800s, 1850s, that's when things started turning. The American Institute of Architects was created in like 1860 something, I think. But that influence didn't hit other parts of the world until later. Right. And they didn't even it was the builder, like the builder design. In Japan too, it's much more modular. Right. I digress a little here, but it's just if you think about the world, you know, the point really is you look at these areas that are untouched, right, by
Right.
like, you know, modernism and this European influence.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of, my point is like, it's like, it makes sense to have the guy, to have one person or one
Right.
entity responsible. It's kind of like innately.
It's the natural path.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
if you give it analogies to other fields like music or,
Mhm.
or cooking.
You got your conductor.
Yeah.
You got your chef in the
Yeah,
kitchen.
they don't.
Yeah.
It's not like the guy who's right. It's not like the guy who just wrote recipes and never cooked.
Yep.
He couldn't really write recipes that way.
Right.
You know.
Right. Exactly.
So landscape. That's an area I told you last night we work with a design build landscaping
Right.
firm in Boston, and,
Yep.
we love
Yep.
it. But what are, and you come from more of the commercial residential construction.
Yeah.
What's some of the differences between landscape design and construction
An interior.
yeah.
You know, people think there's more of a difference than there really is. And when we found that to be successful at landscape design, we really had to pull a lot of the interior outside. You know, we had to really jive with what the client was trying to achieve inside their house, what their aesthetic was, what their color palette was, what their mood was, you know, that kind of thing, and pull that outside. And you know, I've got a big background in interior architecture, and Kate has a major background in interior design. So that we kind of took that to the outside and wanted to take that same level of thought and create to the exterior, which is sometimes lacking. You know, and then at the same time, it's all about listening to the client. You know, a lot of designers try to just put their touch on something, and make it their own, create their own design without really listening to the
That's
client.
a huge point.
Huge, you know, and they want to make it theirs, whether it's actually works for the client or not. So it's one thing we learned on doing the interior design stuff, and we took that again to the exterior.
Awesome.
And it's made it very successful.
Awesome. Yeah, I find a big, you know, we call it our pre-design phase, where we're not designing, but we're just asking questions of the
Right.
client. It's
Yep.
like a survey, right? It's
Right.
like a questionnaire.
Right.
I think most architects do that, right?
Yeah, and we do that too, and the bigger landscape design companies do.
Yeah.
You know, where we take a meeting at the beginning, you know, the free
Yeah.
consultation.
Yeah.
And I get most of what the client wants with that, you know, with that one meeting, and I've pretty much got the design.
Do you
You
know
know.
a lot of name of plants now?
No,
Okay.
I couldn't.
Do most clients?
You know, no, but Kate.
Right.
That's why I got Kate. See, I'm
Yeah.
a nuts and bolts, hardscape, you know, decks,
Yeah.
trellises, retaining walls, pools, permitting, all
Okay.
that stuff.
Yeah.
I know nothing about plants. You
Yeah.
know, if you handed me a plant, I give it about 2 weeks to live.
Yeah, yeah.
Yet I own a landscape
Clients
company.
must really lean on you guys on the plants, right?
They do. Oh, they absolutely do. That's where
100%.
Kate comes from.
Yeah, yeah,
Kate
yeah.
knows everything there is. She's the plant princess. You know, she's just, you know, waves her magic wand, and this stuff is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And what's funny, and what I've learned about the landscaping through doing this with Kate, was there's way more than just the aesthetics of the plants. There's all kinds of things that go into, you know, what makes a plant survive in that space. There's the type of soil that you've got. There's a bunch of different kinds of soil. The pH of the soil. Is it full shade, partial shade, or full sun? You know, what's the wind pattern? You know, when I'm on site, I'm always noticing, you know, where's north, south, east, west.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
how's that going to affect
Because
where we plant what?
a year later, client call you up, all my plants are dead.
Yeah, they can, you know, but that's why we go through all that at the beginning, because also, like, for example, you know, the sun in the winter drops into the horizon a bit, right?
Okay.
And so casts longer shadows.
Yeah.
So you don't want to. So things like herbs, citrus trees, that kind of stuff. You know, planter boxes. You don't want to put those on the south side of the yard, where they're going to be in full shade through the winter.
Okay.
Because they're just going to die.
Yeah.
Right. Also, grass. If you're going to plant grass in a yard, and you've got a big old building on the south side that's going to cast shade through the first quarter of that yard, you want to find some kind of hardscape to put over there, some kind of shade-friendly plantings, and
Yeah.
not put grass.
Yeah. You gotta water the grass in California, yeah?
Oh, of
or
course.
does I?
Oh, yeah.
Like it's a must. You have to water.
Yeah,
Like
we-
you have to have sprinklers.
We do sprinklers, or they actually have. We do a lot of drip irrigation to save water for
Oh, that's
all the
cool.
plantings.
From the roof? Like what's
No,
drip
no,
irrigation?
it's like these little flexible conduits that kind of go through
okay.
underneath the mulch.
Oh yeah, I've seen those.
And
yeah.
they've got these trunk lines that go out, and then little fingers that go out to each individual plant.
Oh,
and they
neat.
circle the root of each individual
Oh,
plant
wow.
and deliver the water to the plant itself.
Oh, neat.
So you're only watering where the plant is, and not like with spray irrigation, it's watering everywhere whether there's a plant there or not.
Yeah.
And so that's why you spend so much water.
Yeah.
This delivers it right to the plant, and it's underneath the mulch. So we add mulch, a certain kind of nugget mulch, which soaks up a little bit of that water, and then throughout the day releases it back into the ground. And it kind of helps, helps with evaporation, that kind of stuff. Grass still needs spray because grass just needs a lot of water. But now they've got drip irrigation that's like a whole grid that you put underneath the grass right before you lay the grass.
Oh, wow.
And so there's no spray, so you can have a whole lawn with no spray.
Oh, wow.
Because it's
So a lot more expensive?
a little bit, not
Yeah,
too
yeah.
bad.
Okay.
Not too bad.
Neat.
Yeah.
I mean, cost is a thing. We're talking about a questionnaire, asking the clients lots
Yeah.
of questions, taking our own inventory of the site, or
Right.
in our case, the home,
Yeah.
doing like a home inspection.
Right.
I think one thing where with a design build company, the capability is much higher, is to talk about cost early on, like where
It's a
are we going to
must.
end up? Because
Yeah.
if you're the architect and you're not building, what you say about the cost, you're not accountable for.
Right.
And since you're not building, you don't know what things cost as much. So you're more apt to go for like a
Right.
square footage cost. And if you're the builder, early on, it's much more. You know what things cost, but it's much more difficult
Right.
to like, put what are you estimating, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because that's a key thing.
Yeah.
Because we run into that all the time with clients. Because we find that in the interior world, in interior construction, clients tend to have a better idea, a relative idea of what things might cost. You've got all the house, those house flipping shows out there and all this kind of stuff, which
Oh, bullshit.
it is all bullshit. I'll tell you that. But
Except a few. This old house.
yeah,
I don't think they talked about costs on that show though.
no, maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I tend to find the clients kind of think they know what they're talking about on that. But on landscaping, they just give it up. And they just say, we just have no idea. And I've had clients that
Yeah. Oh,
wanted
right.
to pave their whole yard and add, 500 plants and a whole bunch of lighting, and said their budget was $5,000. And they weren't intending to be facetious. They
Right.
that was just they just had
They
no
don't know.
clue what it took.
Yeah.
So I usually it's vital at the beginning of the project, even with the first meeting, that you set a realistic target for what the client wants to invest in the project.
Yeah.
And then kind of give them a real rough idea, like, based on that first meeting, you're in this rough range. And so it gives them, and it may go lower, may go higher than that once you actually develop the plans and stuff. But
You're
it gives-
educating them,
You're
right?
educating
Yeah.
them and setting an expectation at the beginning so that you're more of a team member with them developing this, as opposed to, you're promising the world and then you give them a sticker shock at the end and then it never goes anywhere and they've
Yeah.
just wasted 2 months.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, you're not charged. You're using the same plants, the same basic labor costs. So, it really comes down to who you trust, who
Yep.
you feel comfortable with.
Yep.
As long as you're talking to a reputable firm who can deliver your type of project, who has a track record to deliver that, I think that's the most important thing to come down to. And early on, you should be talking to different firms because you should be getting very similar ranges for the same project, right?
Right. The one area where I've seen issue, at least in LA, where there's hillside. Hillside is a whole nother scenario than flatland projects.
Oh
because
yeah, even for landscaping.
For when it deals with hardscape, not really landscape.
Okay.
The only time it gives landscape any trouble is when it's so steep that when you go to irrigate the plants, the water just runs off before it has a chance to soak in. A lot of times the super steep hills are more rocky and silty.
You're right.
And they don't hold plants as well. And
Yeah.
so on a very steep hillside, we won't recommend small plantings or little, seeding, doing seeds or doing like what they call flats, or those little tiny little baby plants,
Okay.
that you can get 16 in a flat. We usually recommend doing a more mature plant where we actually carve a pocket for the plant. We fill it with fertilizer, and then we set the plant in that and water it. So it's got its own little pot buried in the ground, basically, and it gives it a chance to live. So that's the only time, on hillsides. But when you're talking hardscape, and you're talking putting a deck in, or a wall, or anything like the patio, LA, particularly hard, hillside, just it's astronomically more expensive, and there's a lot that goes into it. Some contractors will sort of gloss it over at the beginning, give an estimated budget that's a bit lowball, and then it'll, then as they go to install, they find that bedrock is way lower than they thought it was, and you end up with change orders. So we always recommend, and we're always a very major sticklers with just doing all the planning up front, even if it takes a few extra weeks. You get all the planning done, get all the engineering done, do everything right so that you know before you go.
Yeah.
And when we issue you a cost, it's a realistic cost, and we're not going to give you a bunch of change orders.
Yeah, I mean, we really do our best to have the initial kind of ballparking, and then,
Right.
We do provide an estimate before we start our design process.
Sure.
And we do a range at that point.
Right,
And
right.
we've done that project, a similar project, and that's really what we're basing it on.
Yep.
But we do have changes in design because we're looking at different options.
Of
There might
course.
be things,
Yeah.
new data that we get from the home.
Exactly.
And I like to say we have our change orders during the design process,
Right. Right.
which is better. I mean,
It is.
because we have a project right now. Actually, it's landscape related. We're doing a garage. It's totally landscape related, man. I don't know if I haven't talked to you about this, but it was going to be detached. Then there was a tree that was on where it was in contention with the neighbor. They were like, no, it's our lot line. There's two different surveys
Right.
going back to 1890
Right.
where it was like
Right.
different. So we're like, okay. So now it's attached, but it's a narrow lot. And so the driveway, the house is on the right side, and then the driveway's on the left.
Right.
But and then there's another tree that we just realized we needed to move the retaining wall to 3 feet, 3.5 feet,
Okay. Yeah.
24-inch circumference maple.
Okay.
We're basing it off of 3.5 feet. We need to give 3.5 feet for the roots.
For the root ball. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, that changed things, but I think we've finally figured it out.
Right.
Where they can still like park in their car. We
Yeah.
actually chalked it out.
Yep. Yeah.
We went to a parking lot. We've done this 3 or 4 times because we went from like an 18-foot garage door now to a 20-foot garage door.
Right.
We had to shrink the depth 1 foot,
Yeah.
but I think it'll work now.
Yeah.
And I don't know what my whole point is. Well, it's kind of like it's a change order. Like we haven't started. Thank God, we're doing this now, and we're figuring all this out.
Well, that's the purpose of design.
Yeah.
Yeah. The design from your first meeting to the end of design, there's a whole lot of development. Ideas change, concepts change. You're able to finally dig into, what's involved, what do you need to do, and sure, it will change through design. But that's why you do design. That's why design build is such a good idea, because it forces all those changes to the surface now, so that you then at the end of design you can properly set a realistic budget, and you've gone through all that workout. And a project is only as good as its planning.
Totally.
90% of problems that you run into on a construction project, be it landscape or interior, all stem back to improper planning.
Yeah,
or incomplete
I
planning.
mean, 100%. And
Yeah.
the thing about it is this is how I feel. Unless you're a design build firm, or unless you're an architect who's really who knows what things cost, who
Right.
has built, because there are architects out there
Sure.
like that, who have more of a design build mindset.
Yep.
And when I say design build mindset, it's like you can't just have the drawings. You can't just have the rendering and the plan and not have thought through everything else.
Right.
Like how it's going to be executed. What are the trades involved?
How are you going to get the equipment in there? What's your path of?
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. And if you're not responsible for it, you're not going to think with it.
Right.
Michelangelo, just to get back, even though this guy didn't call himself an architect, he developed scaffolding.
Yeah.
He created inventions in scaffolding to figure out how to build.
Wow.
And that was the hat of the architect at that point in time.
Right.
I mean, he was being very modest when he said he wasn't an architect, really. But
yeah.
So the planning. This guy David Sellers, I interviewed him. Who's one of the founders of Design Build. He graduated Yale in 1964,
Oh, wow.
architecture school, and then just started building. And I admire this guy tremendously. And he Design Build to him was kind of like building on the fly, like designing and then just building. And there is a lot of truth there where you say, once you're on site, once you have you can see things obviously more clearly. But I believe that and I think the way your process works is similar, where it's you have a complete design phase, like
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
it's done before you build.
Right. Well, we've got 2 design phases. You know, the schematic design, which
Mhm.
is, you know, the broad strokes and sort of like, you know, painting the picture of how everything's going to lay out, where everything's going to be located, what all the plants are, what all the specs are, what all the finishes are, where the lighting goes, elevations of any kind of trellis structure or deck, that kind of thing. And then a phase 2 design, which is the design development, all the, you know, CDs, which are the construction drawings and permit plans, getting it through, you know, engineering, getting it through soils tests if we need to, and all this kind of, you know, whatever might be needed in order to get it approved by the city if there's any parts of it that require construction plans or require permit plans and permit approval. So we do that as a phase 2.
Yeah.
Then after that, then we're, you know, then you got it nailed, you know exactly where every nail is
Yeah.
going and every.
So which is traditional architectural phases, right?
Right.
I think the thing we're adding to it is the costing information. So you throughout the whole process, cost is part of the decision-making process. It's not just
Right.
the plans.
Right.
And then just the mindset of execution, having that the whole way through, it does help develop the design and change the design because you are thinking with that. You know?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
What are you have Nest cameras on all your sites, right?
I do.
I'm gonna steal that from you.
Really? Yeah.
I'm gonna figure out how to do that. Yeah. I
Yeah,
think that's
it's.
awesome.
I mean, you know, I had my guys had to get used to it. They called me Big Brother for a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
but
they can check yourself, right?
yeah. Well, you know what?
You have to dispose of some of that camera, I'm sure.
What's that? Oh, what are you talking about? You talking about when I?
Well, you had this habit where you would like to undress a lot, just in the looked like nobody was
It's
around.
full of shit. It's full of shit. No, but the camera did catch some shenanigans on site. You know, dancing and
Yeah, that's great.
stuff that other people
I
would
saw
do.
some of that. Yeah.
Nah, yeah. But no, we got cameras on site that'll, you know, keep site security in. The homeowners really like it, you know, because the homeowners have a lot of people they don't know on their job site. So the fact that there's always something recording is great. It, you know, these days it, you know, alerts you when when a body is seen in the camera. So, you know, it tells you when people arrive on site in the morning.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
It just lets you control the project better.
Absolutely, and
Right.
you can, you know, and you always have a history on it, so you can kind of rewind and see what got done in the last 7 days period, what got done in the last 2 days. You know, when did the inspector arrive on site? You know, a bunch of stuff like that, and you know, security wise, and it really helps. And if I have got a bunch of projects going, I give logins to my clients actually, and to my project managers, so even the client can, you know, see what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, and they feel it gives them an extra bit of, you know, assuredness and security and whatnot. And it's been very successful, so we like that. We like doing that.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the show. I've learned a ton from you over the years.
Oh,
You're
ditto.
an amazing friend. I really
Absolutely.
admire you.
Yeah, you're my boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some fun.
And we're gonna bring back design build. I mean, just think, it's
absolutely.
like the knowledge out there. Even when I was talking to a builder yesterday, and when you say design build, a lot of people are just like, "What are you talking about?" Like, it's still like this separation is still there because it's been like that for so long.
Yeah.
But
It has, because it's been pushed in such another, you know, it's in other directions. And
it's been people have been educated. They've been duped, man.
They have, you know, but it's you know, a very litigious world these days. You know, everyone's kind of looking to
good point.
carve their own little corner in their own little bubble and have an out on everything. You know, always have a legal out.
Yeah.
You know, you can always, you know, point it back at someone else. And you know, we took a look at that. And we go, well, you can't really get a product that way. You know, and the only way I know I can get a product is by managing the entire product and having it all.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
you guys kill it at that. You know,
Yeah.
that's why you guys are so successful.
I mean, design build. I think the legal system, the insurance business, design build would reduce that tremendously.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
the liability is all in one place, right?
It's
So,
all in one place. It's you know, everyone's responsible for their own shit.
Yeah.
You know, pardon my French, but you know, everyone's got their own point of responsibility, and they can't point their fingers elsewhere.
Okay.
You know, because we run the engineers. You know, we run all the trades. Everything's on us.
Yeah.
So the client we just update the client every week on what's happening, even if there's errors, even if there's stuff that delays it. We let them know what the deal is and what our proposed solution is, and they just come to us. They don't have to go between a bunch of people.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks
Any
for having
parting words of wisdom?
I think I'll leave that off the video.
All right.